What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Accelerate Your Life podcast. I am your host, Mallory, and we've got a guest episode today. We've got Natalie back on the pod for the second time. Hey, Natalie. Hey, from Malaysia.
Hi. Hey from Malaysia. I know. I'm always somewhere different, I feel like.
Where were you last time we did? Do you remember?
I think I do remember actually, I was in Montenegro. It was
I don't
last
even know where that is.
yeah, it was almost a year ago. That's crazy. Time
Wait,
flies.
that is wild. I've been doing the pod for over a year. That's crazy.
I know,
Wait,
exactly.
where is Montenegro? I don't even remember.
Yeah, it's like one of the Balkan countries in like Eastern Europe.
Okay.
Yeah,
And now she's bopped back on over to Asia. She is everywhere, guys, everywhere.
everywhere.
But me and Natalie wanted to do an episode. Well, it might end up being a little bit of a series, but that'll depend on y'all. If you guys like this, give us feedback, let us know. But long story short, we wanted to do an episode on dating, and we'll kind of see where this one ends up going. I mean, we have an idea of kind of what we want to talk about today, but me and Natalie have been friends since she started working for EA, which was like 3 years ago. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I always joke that like if I got married tomorrow, Natalie would be one of my bridesmaids, even though we've never met each other in person, which is insane. But we've become like really good friends outside of just work. And a big part of that is obviously you talk to your girlfriends about dating and your relationships. And we've definitely done our fair share of that. And also I'm gonna like hype Natalie up for a second. Like I look up to her so much and she has just become like somebody who I've always thought is just so smart, intelligent, self-aware. And so like especially, those people that you just go to when you need like advice and you want to hear their point of view, like she has been that to me. So she's heard me talk a lot about like the things I've been going through in the dating realm. And she shared a lot as well. And so yeah, we just thought it would be really cool to kind of do an episode talking about things that we've learned, and specifically in this one, talking about things that we have felt like we needed to work on as well. Because when we were discussing like doing something about dating in today's dating culture, I think the first place that a lot of people take it is just like how crappy it is out there. And like, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I do think that, and Natalie was saying this earlier to me, like, your perception becomes your reality, right? So if you constantly just talk about how it's negative and you say like dating sucks in the city, dating sucks in the city, like of course it's gonna suck. And so I think number one, it's like shifting your mentality around it, but also number two, like realizing we all have a play in that as well. And I know like I had my fair share and still probably do, but like things that stick out to me that I needed to work on in order to be the best version of myself showing up into like dating in my next relationship. And I know Natalie's talked about that as well. So that was what we kind of wanted to focus this episode on, is maybe one or two things that we both individually have taken time to work on. And I think just like the biggest or one of the biggest reasons was like so anybody listening to can maybe like number one change the perception that you're having of dating culture, right? And like not being so negative and take some self responsibility, and do some of the work that like maybe you need to do to get where you want to be. So yeah, I mean, anything before we get into it that you want to add, Natalie?
No, I mean, I think that it's a really relatable topic. And part of me was like, I don't really know if either one of us is really qualified to talk on this. But then
Yeah.
I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? I think that we are actually one of the most qualified to have this conversation because we're actually in it and we're experiencing it. And so I do want this to just be like a really open and honest and candid conversation around, the things that we experience, because I think that a lot of people can probably relate to it.
Yeah, and on the topic of like being qualified, I will not sit here and claim that like, oh, I'm an expert on, the work that I did or like getting to the place. I mean, hey, look, I'm so single, Natalie's so single, so I don't know what that says, but more so just our own personal experience of like this is what, we've dealt with. And I think like you said, it's very relatable. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are struggling too. But I think like there's also so many people or can feel like there's so many people out there that are not struggling. And so you can feel alone, especially like we're getting like I feel like we're watching a lot of people younger. I'm watching a lot of people younger than me getting engaged, getting married, and we're on like air quotes. Like older end because we're both still very young, but like older end where it can be very easy to feel like we're late, right? Or we're
Right.
behind. And so for anybody again listening, like number one, you're not. But number two, like we all just, yeah, are on our own different journeys. And I think looking at it from more of this, I want to say it's a positive lens of like, hey, there's things that we can work on too. And it's not just that like dating culture out there is crappy. But for context, because even I'm like being young, I'm 28 and I even forget how old you are,
I
Natalie.
know. Yeah, I'm 34. I feel like
Okay,
it's,
34.
yeah, I know. I feel a lot younger.
I always forget because I would never guess that you're 34. And if anybody's watching on YouTube, you guys would agree with that. Because Natalie, first of all, young soul and just also perfect
Fun.
skin and looks so young. But okay, yes. So wanted to talk about kind of the work we've done to be ready for the right person, navigating the dating scene and taking some self-responsibility. So we're gonna each talk about like one big thing that we've focused on ourselves over the past few years, where we see that we prior may not have been bringing the best version of ourselves to the table prior, right? In dating. So I'll start off by kind of having like Natalie maybe share. I guess the first thing that I would love to know is when did when was the first time that you felt kind of this like shift in the way that you looked at dating in terms of, because I was trying to think how to word this earlier, because like I know for me, I feel like I had a point in my life where dating and looking for, what it meant to be in a relationship went from it being just this very like, when I say casual, I don't mean like a casual thing. I just mean like there wasn't a lot of gravity to it, right? Like you're just young and like it's the cool thing to have a boyfriend in or in high school or whatever. And it's just like but when did it become this thing of like there's more gravity to it, right? And like, does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. Because I think that you're absolutely right. Not always, but I think that, when you're young, there is this idea that you're just kind of like having fun, right? And it doesn't have to have, it's not super, super serious and there's no intention behind it. And I feel like I've always kind of dated with a lot of intention, but I definitely did fall into that trap, especially when I was in my mid 20s. Like, I'm not going to put a label on it. It's going to be super casual because you kind of just want to be the cool girl that, whatever. But I realized that that just wasn't me. And I think that the shift for me was probably honestly when I was around your age, I was like, no, I really feel like now my focus is I really do want to find a partner. I want to settle down. I wanted the traditional life of having a husband and children. And so I started to date really with more intention. And that's really when I got into my last serious relationship. And um, it was on a really good trajectory until it wasn't. And that for me, after that relationship ended, that's when I really realized, okay, it's not so much like I was dating with intention, but I just hadn't really taken the time to figure my own stuff out because that relationship, truthfully, it probably should have ended sooner than it actually did. And looking back now, I can honestly say I know that, and I knew that in the moment. I just so desperately wanted the search to be over. And that's not a reason to stay in a relationship, obviously, but I knew I was going to keep repeating the same patterns if I didn't do the work. And I think that's a big thing is that you can so easily blame, well, he was this and all my partners were this, that, and the other. And that's, but ultimately I chose them. I attracted them and I ultimately chose them and I chose to stay in a relationship with them. So you have to take that accountability. And really, when I started taking that accountability, develop that self-awareness, it completely changed my life. And while I'm still single, I will say it's really been the catalyst for me to do all of this work. And I do think that, with every single person that I meet or I'm going to meet, I'm showing up as a way better version of myself because I have recognized that that was something that I was doing. So yeah, just dating with a little bit more intention and just knowing, being able to recognize in the moment, these, okay, I recognize that this is something that I used to do in the past, or this is something that I've recognized in past partners. Just being a little bit more aware of what you want, but also how the negative things, I'm using that word, the
Yeah.
negative things that you bring are ultimately going to sabotage the relationship as well. I think it's really, really important.
Yes. Okay. So you mentioned in that there were some things that you recognize that you had a play in, right? That like, okay, I'm maybe like there's parts of me or reasons that I'm attracting the wrong person, or like you even said, air quotes, negative things that you brought. What were those things for you that you found that you did need to work on that you're kind of referencing?
Yeah, definitely a big one for me was a lack of communication, which is so interesting because obviously what I do for work for you, I'm in the communication business.
Yeah.
But when it comes to communicating my feelings, I really do feel like I never felt safe or comfortable ever expressing my feelings. It would literally take me days just to muster up the courage to talk about anything, which
Mm.
that's not normal, right? Like when you're in a relationship with someone, you should feel comfortable to have these hard conversations. So definitely a lack of communication. I really had no boundaries. I was very much the person that wanted to not abandon myself, but in a lot of ways abandon myself to really, it's almost like over giving to really prove that you are worthy and deserving of this relationship. And that's not a good thing, but also just yeah, I would say probably those are the biggest things I really had to work on is lack of communication and just catering only to that person and completely abandoning like my own desires in a relationship, which I know that probably sounds like it's about me, but it really does. It's causes a really
Yeah.
it's not going to make a strong relationship because there's two people in that relationship, right?
100%. What made you like come to that realization? Was it something that you always kind of knew even before that one? Like, hey, this is something I struggle with. Um, and then it was just eventually where it got to the point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna own it and actually work on it. Or was there something where like it clicked you didn't know you were struggling with that until like you did? That makes sense.
Yeah, honestly, it was a combination of the two things. I mean, I obviously looked at my past dating history and I was like, well, it's not the best. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't great. So I did have the awareness that obviously there's something here. Like the people that I'm choosing are not 100% what. So I had that awareness, but it wasn't really until I started doing what I do for work now, I was really exposed to the coaching industry. And I feel like coaching is so much more practical. I know it probably sounds like I'm biased, but I think that coaching is so much more practical. It really gets you to the root. So I had never done anything like therapy or coaching before, but I was actually on a campaign where we actually provided anxious attachment coaching. And I remember interviewing for that position. And one of the biggest things that that coach said to me is, I really, ideally want to bring someone onto the team who has anxious attachment or who can actually identify with that attachment style. First of all, I had no idea what attachment style theory even was 4 years ago. And I said, you know what, I don't relate to that, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. Ultimately, I got that position. And when I was in it, I was having these conversations with all these people and really emotional conversations. And they were describing, this is how I feel in relationships, or my current partner does this and it brings, up so much anxiety. And I could relate to so many of the things that they were saying. And so that's really when I started looking into attachment style theory. And if anyone listening has never done that, I encourage, people are very familiar with the love languages, but attachment style theory is something that I've definitely seen an increase of it over the last few years. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. But yeah, that's really when I started looking into that. And I realized, okay, it turns out I actually am anxious attached. So I actually ended up working with that coach even after I left his team. And that's really the last 2 years, I would say, has just been, I've been like in the weeds of doing this type of work. Um, but yeah, that's really when I realized, yeah, this is actually something that I need to work on. And there are so many things within that. It's such a broad term, but yeah, there are so many different things that I realized that I struggled with and that I was ultimately responsible for the way that my relationships had kind of gone up until that point.
Yeah, and I think that's like why coaching therapy, I mean, they're not the same, but like can be kind of lumped in the same bucket. Like they're such a mirror. And even if you don't
Mhm.
think inherent, because I think a lot of people want to use health coaching for retroactive, like you now you're in a bad spot with fitness, like here's that's to help, or therapy, like you're in a bad spot with your mental health, here's something to help. But I love them as more of even a proactive thing because there are probably things that like you can work on, but maybe you're not aware of them yet, right? And like so, and I know that I had the same thing like with even like things that I've really worked on in terms when it comes to dating, but like I had to work on with myself for dating. Like I learned through therapy and like that I would not have recognized had I not, done that route. So I can definitely relate to that. Now, after you kind of recognize that you identified like anxious attachment, this is something that I need to work through in order to show up to relationships better. We've talked about how that's also something I've struggled with too. I think there's a lot of people out there that do. So what steps did you take to kind of work through that?
Yeah, well, coaching was definitely a big one. I mean, it brought up a lot of things that honestly I had no idea, I had problems with or had challenges with. And it really is a mirror. It really brings up a lot of stuff. And if you really want to get into the weeds of it, it's like way to like when we were kids. But then, being able to dissect past relationships and what have you, and really understanding, okay, this is a pattern. And I think that you just have to be, I mean, you have to own it, right? The first thing is really taking that accountability. Accountability will set you free. I say that all the time. But the second you can take accountability, you will feel so much freer. And so being able to recognize those red flags a little bit sooner. So when I was back into the dating world. I mean, now it's a little bit harder because I'm constantly moving around. But when I was still back home in Canada, whenever I would date someone, it's like I could identify those red flags a little bit faster, or being able, or doing the opposite, right? Or like if I felt like, okay, I'm sensing a pattern that I do is coming up. Why is that? And ultimately, it's being able to recognize, okay, is there actually a connection here worth pursuing, or am I making excuses for this person? Am I justifying? So being able to have those, real conversations with myself in real time, that really changed the dating game. Because I think for a long time, what I was doing is, yeah, making excuses like, well, he might not be XYZ, but you just kind of make excuses for this person, or you're hopeful. I mean, really, that's what it is. Like you are hopeful that it's going to work
Yeah.
out. But I think being able to recognize some of those things that are, a true red flag and a difference in compatibility versus something that it's just something that you could probably get over. I think that though being able to recognize that, and yeah, just having a real life situation, like having real life relationships, I think really helps you be able to work through those things. I think that that is the one good thing about actively dating, like you are, is that you're able to really work through it. Whereas I feel like I have the awareness, but I don't have the practicality of it necessarily. Um, so yeah, I need to get back on that
I
track.
feel like though that because I know, and this may be getting into the our like personal life and friend side of things. I know there's been some scenarios for you where you, because like we've even talked about, I'm like I'm so proud of you because like we've acknowledged that there's a different way you've approached a situation than like you may have in the past. So I feel like you have had some real life practice, and like, are there any kind of maybe as specific as you are willing to get, but like specific scenarios of like, hey, I recognized a place that I'm like, I left that situation proud of how I approached it versus like, I know 3 years ago, me before I kind of did this work would have like let it go on too long or made excuses for it. Like, are there any kind of specific like contrasts to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing I really did have to work on was my communication. So, really avoided having hard conversations. And even when I finally did have the hard conversations, I was really hesitant to be fully transparent about how I felt because I still, want to express, oh, I'm feeling this way. But, it's not necessarily, it's like I just want to be a little bit more direct and more clear. That's something I've really worked on. And so, I have had real life examples of where something really bothered me over the last 2 years, or something, was really weighing heavy on my heart and my mind. And instead of just waiting, I would just have the conversation. And 9 times out of 10, it hasn't even been as bad as I thought that it was
Yeah.
going to be. The conversation, I was like trying to predict the outcome beforehand. So that was causing me a lot of anxiety. I was trying to predict, well, he's going to say XYZ, or he's going to say that he feels this way, when in reality, it never was actually that
Yeah.
way. And I think that that is a testament to the work too that I have done, is that the more work that we do, I think that it does bring you closer to the type of partner that you do want. And so I knew that I really wanted I know that I want to be with someone who is emotionally mature, who can have these hard conversations and not make me feel, stupid for feeling this
Right.
way, or making my feelings feel invalid. And yeah, so I've definitely, that is definitely something that I do now, is I'm not afraid of having hard conversations. And I'm sure I mean, I don't know, is that something that you feel like you have struggled with as well? Because for me, it really was communication. I would say if I
Yeah.
had to only pick one, it was lack of communication. I'm so curious for you, like what is the one big thing that you think that you really had to deal with and are probably still dealing with?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually think communication has never been too big of an issue. I feel like I'm pretty direct and like I've always been more of the I cannot Maybe my
Yeah.
problem truly has been like I can't relax until like I've had the ripped off the band-aid. And sometimes, honestly, this wasn't even what I was planning to talk about, but like recognize even in like friendships, relationships, work relationships, sometimes my problem is being too, what's the word I'm looking for? Impulsive, I guess. And just reacting quicker, like too quickly before I like not thinking before I speak, right? But more so because I'm like, I just want to deal with it. I can't like be, but then that kind of
Mhm.
creates like maybe not the best, it coming out the best way, right? In a communication standpoint. But I feel like for me, honestly, the big thing that I feel like I've truly worked on the last couple years has been really understanding like what it means to be a partner and becoming less selfish in relationships. And I know you and I like we want to do another episode on like letting go of our independence to a degree when we do start dating because I think for us being like hyper independent women like especially when you go a couple years without being in a relationship like you get very used to being on your own. We're both like
Mhm.
self-employed, we're business women like we're good, right? Like we can take care of ourselves. And I think like something I have kind of struggled with is softening that a little bit and remembering that like I'm not the boss of everything when I get into a relationship. And yeah, I think just like learning how to be a partner and what it means to be a partner, like truly a partner. And I kind of like mentioned this earlier, but I feel like there's a part of your life where like you think you, even when you're 18, 20, like you think when you're dating somebody that like it is serious and that you are like, but you don't really know what a true, all that goes into a true, I feel like relationship and partnership and what it means to compromise and what it means to be on the same team. And like, and maybe this is just me, but I feel like I was just very it was just always about like making sure I was like the best and somebody viewed me as the best and was on top. And it was almost like I had to win versus like, no, 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 we're on the same team. Right. So I think it was
Mhm.
finally my first adult relationship leaving that where I like was very self-reflective and I was like, okay, here's where I was the problem. And in a lot of those ways, it was me just recognizing like I wasn't playing it like we were on the same team, if that makes sense.
Mhm. It does make sense. Yeah. And it's interesting because I agree with you. I think that there is because the thing is that you want to know, you want to make sure that your needs are met, right? But then where is the balance? And I think that this is something I think about often. It's like you want to make sure that your needs are met, but also there is another person in. So like where I don't know like what the right answer is. So like where do you think that balance is between being, yeah, selfish with your needs and your wants, but also knowing that the way that you are and the way that you show up in relationships is not always the same way that that your
Yeah.
partner is going to want to receive love, you know?
Yeah. I think for me, it like I just truly needed to grow up and get a little bit over the like it's my way or the highway kind of mentality and like realize that if I do want a partnership, like somebody's not going to just I can't just copy and paste someone into my life, which is what I was trying to do. And it's like they also have their own life that they've lived for 27 years and I just can't expect like them to fit into mine. It's like if you're there is a part where like obviously part of this is learning what I look for in compatibility, I think too. And there should be enough compatibility where there doesn't need to necessarily be these like drastic changes. Like you like to do a lot of the same things, so you're doing them together. And like, you know, something I think about a lot is I don't think I could ever date somebody who like was a huge night owl and slept in late because I'm not that way. And it's like to me, those things that would be too hard to like copy and paste. But there's going to be obviously a degree where like you just can't expect them to fit into your life. So I think that that was a big part. It was honestly it's more was just like the selfishness and kind of that and like recognizing that even in just really any situations like you're on the same team and it's not about being right. It's like a big line that stuck out to me that I really feel like I've lived by the last couple of years is like do you want to be right or do you want to be happy. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean not having like a backbone and that doesn't mean not knowing who you are and standing your ground, but I just think that when I was younger there was a lot of scenarios where truly whatever the situation was didn't matter. All I cared about was being right. And
Mhm.
you oftentimes are not going to be right and happy. So I feel like I've really done a lot of work on like leaning into the what does it mean to like yeah, compromise and be a team.
Yes, yeah. I think and it comes with maturity too.
Yeah.
Comes with maturity and experience because I think, when you're younger, you can be mature in a lot of ways, but also very immature in the way that you show up in relationships. And that's something, again, it just goes back to the idea. I think the maturing truly is being able to always start with yourself. Always know, okay, like what was my part in this? Not saying take 100% accountability, but there's two people always, and so you once you start with yourself and the things that you did to contribute to your own unhappiness and suffering, the more that you do that, I truly do feel like that really is when you start attracting like healthier relationships.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think it was partly just getting older and like not being a,
Yeah.
selfish. Like, I mean, granted that one was when I was like 25, but I think another big thing too is like this is not even related specifically to like dating, but it's something I needed to work on in myself to be like more with like to attract what I did want. And for me, that was also this kind of along the lines of what I just talked about, but like flexibility and less rigidity. And because I think, especially like building EA, I was living a very structured life for several years, both with the business side of things and even like if you look, if you knew me 4 years ago with my own health and fitness, I was so strict and structured and I just had no flexibility. And so it made dating really hard too because I wasn't go with the flow and like I honestly wasn't a very easy person to, just want to be around all the time or like try to make plans with or travel with because it was always again kind of like here's my way I got to do it and if it doesn't go my way like I'm not happy, right? But like I that didn't make me happy and I knew that outside of even a relationship like I really wanted to work on flexibility and just being a little bit less like type A. Now, I do think my type A-ness is a superpower in a lot of ways, and I've also come to the
Mhm.
grasp of loving it and like not wanting to totally change that about me, but like being able to be a little bit more flexible, being able to be a little bit more go with the flow. And like I knew I wanted somebody that would help me do that, but that somebody who would help me do that probably didn't want someone that was like extremely uptight, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I like worked on that quality about myself first and then like found myself that with the right person as well, like it made it easier to want to do those things and like not take life so seriously. So it was something like unrelated to a relationship that I had to work on that I knew I wanted to work on personally for myself and not for the other person, but then still like made dating better. And I bring that up because I like think that a lot of people can think like I need to change this about myself for a person. And like
Hmm.
that should not be, why you're doing it. Like it was for me, but I knew it was because it was, or not even because I knew it was going to help in relationships, but it happened to as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that coaching with EA is a perfect example. You work on yourself for you, but really something that a conversation I often have with clients actually is like, is it really for you though, or is it for the people around you? Like this investment is really for the people around you. And so I think it's very similar to this, is you're doing the work for yourself, yes, but ultimately so that you are able to show up as a happier, healthier version of yourself. And you're also going to attract people who are also happy and healthy and healed and have done a lot of this work, right? And it honestly, I think that is, while you were talking, I was thinking about this. It's like something that I constantly go back and forth on is like you're doing this work because again it is for you, but ultimately the long-term goal is to find someone. And I've gone back and forth. I've had different seasons where it's like I'm gonna be super intentional. I'm going to, because you hear both. I feel like you hear both. People are like, if you want to find your husband, if you want to find a serious,
Yeah.
partner who's going to be XYZ, you have to be super intentional about it. You have to like manifest it. You have to write all the characteristics out and get super specific, right? And that's worked for people. So I've taken that approach, but I've also heard the opposite. And I've had, multiple seasons where I've taken the opposite stance of, you know what, I'm going to focus on me and the right person. It'll just happen when it happens. The more that I focus on myself, the more I'm going to attract those things, right? So it's like where I don't know if that's something that you struggle with, but I'm
Yeah.
like, where is the balance? Because, and it's actually a conversation that I also had with my coach when I was still working with him, is I was already living this lifestyle, this digital nomad lifestyle. I was changing locations, as you know, last year, like every 2 to 3 weeks, I was in a new country, new city. And he's like, the way that you live your life is not really conducive. And not saying that it's impossible, but he said to me, it's not really conducive to the things that you say that you want because you're constantly moving around. And if you want security and stability, you're going to have to create some stability and security in your own life. And I was like, I don't know, but I also really want to feel like I'm living a life that's authentic to me because if I'm doing that, then the person that I'm going to attract, the people I'm going to attract are hopefully, ideally also going to be that way. But then I've also gone through seasons where I'm like, maybe I should just be really intentional and just make it my only focus. I don't know if that's something that you have struggled
100%.
with. And how do you balance the two between like, okay,
Yeah.
you want to live your life, but you also do want to be, you do, it's a priority. It is a priority to
For
find
sure.
someone.
For sure, 100%. And like yeah, I feel like we'll end up moving into this topic because I have struggled with this so much. I would say all my friends would say that I'm probably like the friend that does go on the most dates and like is putting myself out there and like no shame. Like I've definitely been on the apps and but it's because it is something that is important to me and very much I'll have moments where I lean into that like it's not gonna happen when I'm sitting at home, right? So like I have to put out myself out there and I have to try but then it can get very overwhelming and exhausting and frustrating and just like disappointing, I guess, when like you're putting in this effort and time and it doesn't really seem to be going anywhere. So I even had like actually in September, I told myself like getting off the apps, not going to focus on it because it will just become so much of the forefront of my like it is a priority and I truly and I have no shame in admitting like I like I would love to find my person. Like to me that's the point of life is like and there's like platonic love too, but like the point of life to me is just is love, platonic love and romantic love and like just getting to experience that and like having someone to share it all with, right? It's like I want that. And so it is a priority to me, but then it can easily become just like all you think about. And like I started to find myself being like, oh, do I want to go to this event? Like, yes, maybe because there's potential meeting someone, or no, because there's no potential meeting someone. And it wasn't like, do I want to go to this event because I want to go to this event? You know what I mean? And like I just didn't like the lens at which I was starting to like make decisions through because a lot of my happiness was like being like was dependent on what was going on in my dating life. And obviously that's like not where you want to be either. So then I kind of took a step back and I told myself in September, like I wasn't going to be focusing on that at all. Like I was going to be going to doing things because I wanted to do them, focusing on my friends and like, cool, if something happened, it happened. But then after like 3 or 4 weeks of that, I was like, okay, but like, I also do want to be intentional. So I've absolutely went back and forth between the battle and I
Yeah.
don't have an answer of which one's right or wrong because you do hear both. It all makes sense. And I don't think there is a right or wrong, right? But like all that to say, yes, definitely have struggled with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think just go back to like the original conversation that we were having. I think that yeah, there's going to be different seasons for sure, but I think as long as you're just, doing something that actually feels like right and aligned for you, there is probably no right answer.
Yeah.
What works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you and vice versa. But I think that it just always has to start internally. And if that's where you're starting, I think that, I always try and do everything. Does this feel aligned? Like, does this
Yeah.
feel good for me? And it served me well so far. So
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of again going back to the original thing, like even figuring out like part of the work we've had to do is figuring out like what does align with it. Like what does that mean when you say like
mhm.
I'm gonna just do the things and focus on the things that like are authentic to me and align with me. Like I do feel like you have to figure that out first to be able to like again show up to anything in the future as your best self, or you don't even know what yourself is. And so while maybe that's not explicitly one of the things you and I mentioned, I feel like the reason that you probably got better at communication is because like now you're better at knowing what it is you actually want so you feel more confident in bringing that up or communicating it and like the reason I've gotten a lot better at like being more of a like compromising being more of a partner no it is like because I also know the values that I'm looking for in that and like what is important to me and like we had to take that time though to learn that about ourselves right I don't can you I mean do you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think ultimately, yeah, I'm like not here to like make excuses for people. There are obviously like really there are bad people the way that they show up in relationships is like that's
Yeah.
not the way that you should be treating
Yeah.
people. So I'm not here to take that away. I think that the biggest message I think that we're trying to get across is that you just have to do the work, like figure out what like your part in it. And yeah, the more that you experience, life and relationships and different things that you do, what you don't want is just as valuable as what you do want, right? But the only way that you can figure that out is if you're actually like in it and you're experiencing different situations and different personalities and what have you. But I think that if you're just doing the work, it's going to evolve, but I think that my focal point has gotten so much clearer.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, I think being able to really understand your own triggers and your own wounds and like the things that really, like once you start doing that work, it's not easy. I will say it's very, very uncomfortable
Yeah.
work. I certainly was not ready for some of the things that came up for me when I was doing this work, but it's incredibly liberating. It's very,
Yeah.
very liberating. And it's just, I think that most people avoid doing this work. They think it's like really woo woo, whatever. But I promise, like, it's the only way that you're really going to be able to also attract, because I want to attract someone that's also has also done this work, who also
Totally.
believes in personal development, who works on their mindset,
Totally.
right? So, if you want to attract the top, whatever, 5%, whatever it
Gotta
is,
be it.
you have to be it.
Gotta
You
be it.
have to embody it.
Yeah.
You have to be about it. You can't just
Yeah.
talk about it.
Amen. Well, I don't know if I can say I'm not gonna say I'm in the top 5%, but hopefully we're on the way there. And
You're on the way for sure.
hopefully I'll meet you at my wedding. I'm just kidding. I hope I meet you in person way before my wedding because at this rate, it's not gonna be very soon. Um,
No,
but
no.
yeah, I think this was a great conversation, and I hope it, yeah, sparks some thoughts for people of like, well, I'm not gonna disagree that it's rough out there. We all have our own part in like maybe why we're attracting like the rough out there. And so continue. I mean, I do feel like as I've done this work, like while I haven't found my person, like the quality of people I've talked to and formed relationships with and dated like has definitely gotten better and better. So I don't think that's a coincidence. But anything else you want to add?
The other thing that I will add is yes, I think that it's really important to one of the biggest things that has been really made really clear to me in this whole thing is that while yes, the end goal is to have obviously for both of us a male partner, I think that it really also has really strengthened, like think about our relationship. It really went from
Yeah.
strictly work, we were only talking about work all day, and now it's like our voice notes are like, okay, this top one is a work voice note, this bottom one is a friend
Yeah.
voice note. But it really does strengthen your relationships with, and I talk about this all the time. Your female friendships will
Yeah.
really like make or break your sanity. And that's really been strengthened over the last couple of years. Having women who just tell you how great you are and how well you're doing. And so I want to end off on that note is that I have definitely, I mean, I know that you said this to me over the last 2 years that you've seen my growth, but I have certainly seen your growth as well, both at work and also, romantic and
Yeah.
dating and just on a personal level, because you have done the work. And I think that everything that you and I are talking about, I am very proud of you because it's not just something that you're talking about and trying to inspire other people about. Like you are doing it, right? And I think that you're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And there's just no way for either one of us that this is going to end badly. I do know that there is a plan, and yeah, I've seen your growth, and the positive has definitely been that you're able to kind of see female friendship bonds
Yeah.
be strengthened through all of this,
100%.
the war zone right
Absolutely.
there.
I know, absolutely. And like me and my friend Sarah have talked about this a lot of just like, well, it's not the same. Like I think that a lot of us can focus so much on the lack of romantic love, but like the platonic love that we have in our life can like be a really strong second to that. And like to not just, yeah, for not even forget, but like not put as much emphasis on what that can bring you like when you're just so focused. I think that was a big thing like where her and I were talking about when I was like trying to pull myself out of the just like it always being a forefront of my mind of like feeling like every day and every activity and every choice was driven by oh, could this be where I can meet someone. It's like also pour into the platonic love that like can fill your cup in the same way too. So I think that's a
Yeah.
great point, but cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Let us know if you liked this episode because we had a lot of topics kind of within this realm that we felt we could talk about. So we'll happily do more if you want us to. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.